by that.
See that.
Hey, you're live on Lunch Conversations with Randy and Teddy as Randy calls me out for a typo. What, I spell your name wrong, buddy? I'll fix it later. So Lunch Conversations with Randy and Teddy is sponsored by a brand new sponsor for 2023, and we will introduce you to them next week. We're so excited about this new sponsor because this company is going to help us take this to a whole nother level. So stay tuned as you watch that come about. Randy, I'll introduce myself to people as long as I'm doing okay on the backside. For those who've never met me, I'm Teddy Burriss. I run a business called Burriss Consulting. We're LinkedIn strategists, trainers, and coach. We teach people how to use LinkedIn as a business tool for business, nonprofit, community, and career. We have a brand new academy on Teachable for people who want to learn this tool, and we do one-on-one coaching and corporate training programs. We stand on the street wearing sandwich boards, teaching people how to do this. Wow. Randy, I'm losing my voice. You take it, buddy.
Hey, we're all set. Looks like we're rolling on Facebook and also on LinkedIn. So all good on that end. Randy Wooden with Goodwill Industries of Northwest, North Carolina, director for our professional center here based in Winston. But I have clients around the country, a lot of them here in the Triad, though. And if you're one of those so inclined to kind of put your toe in the job search waters for the new year, reach out to me on LinkedIn. Our services are free, as always. And all we ask is that when you land a job, you let us know. How's that for a deal? We do work by appointment, though. So just give me a call or shoot me an email message on LinkedIn. We'll get you on the calendar and get things squared away. Every week, Teddy and I get together. We have a really cool guest every week. Thom Hayes is no exception here. We're going to get into some topics. I'm going to tease these a little bit, Thom, and then throw it to you to introduce yourself.
All right.
We've always heard the term lead by example. I've heard that, Teddy preaches that all the time. He's a prime example.
Now, Randy, be clear. Okay?
He always leads
by my example.
Lead by example. All right, so we're going to turn this thing and do a little bit of a twist here. We're going to talk today why you don't want to lead by example. As a matter of fact, Thom has a book by that same title, as luck would have it, or coincidence. And so we're going to dive into that a little bit and get into some topics about situational leadership and some other things too. And I've observed this in the sports world that, the Hall of Famer or the great athlete doesn't necessarily make the best manager. And we'll learn about the why behind some of that and how we can use that not only in our business employment life, but also in the job search. So Thom Hayes joined us. Thom, you're active here in the local community. You're working for a company called More Food Services in Clemmons, and you are their talent engagement and development director. But More Food Services, better known as a local franchisee for Chick-fil-A. And I'll tell you, when it comes to getting it right from a customer service standpoint, and that I don't know that too many companies, come to mind quicker than Chick-fil-A. They're doing it right. So, Thom, if you could introduce yourself a little bit more detail and a little bit more about your background.
Yeah, sure. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Thom Hayes, and I was with Barnes & Noble for 27 years, opening stores down the East Coast, managing and opening them, and then went to Lowe's Home Improvement for a while, and currently with More Food Services and working as a talent director, engagement and development director for Chick-fil-A, which is a great experience. So I wrote this book because I was in my role with Barnes & Noble. Primarily, I was in training. So even though I ran the store, that process was in vetting future managers. At that point, this was in the late 90s, early to mid 2000s. That company was growing very well, extremely, extreme growth. So what I was doing was I had to train, vet, bring in a lot of people so that we could fuel that growth with that. We had standards, values, everything we wanted to contribute. And as I was working with the internal managers coming up and also vetting and developing external managers, what I started seeing patterns in what they were doing, and I started telling the same stories. So all of this informed the book, Don't Lead by Example. And, primarily it's what you said earlier was that everyone grew up hearing lead by example, lead by
Yeah.
example.
Yeah.
And then that became kind of a problem from what I was seeing, which was that people were just leading by example and did not want to engage in difficult and critical conversations.
Yeah,
So,
and Tom, we're going to dive into a lot of that in a lot of detail. But I always ask, before we get too deep into the conversation, always ask the why question. What was it that really drove you to say, hey, this is where I need to be. This is what I want to do. What's your why?
my why is it's kind of who I am. I mean, whether I was in sports, I was competing in high school and in college and in cross country and track, and that's all team sports, even though it seems individual success, but you don't win in cross country, for example, by yourself. To get your team in there, that the top 5 have to score. So that was it. That helped form that in terms of my understanding of making sure that we all succeed, not just one person succeed. And then from there, I was in the military. I went to I was in the Army for 21 years on the reserve side. Went to and then with Barnes and Noble, just in great leaders, and then being called upon to lead and to train leaders. So that was my why. I love it. That's who I am. I can't not do it.
We've had a comment or two already. And by the way, if you're watching us live on Zoom, you're part of the conversation here. If you have comments or questions for Thom, please put them in the chat. Teddy will keep an eye on that and work those in where appropriate. I don't know if you want to tackle one of those now, Teddy?
No, not yet, but I just want to remind everybody,
Okay.
especially those who are watching on LinkedIn and Facebook, and that is, we only take questions from people who show up live in our audience. And so that's the best way for you to engage with it on this show is get the Zoom link, sign up, show up, because that way you can hear us behind the scenes and you can ask questions of our guest speaker. And so, yeah, drop your questions in and I'll raise them up. I'll wait a little bit to get Dale's question.
That'll work. So, yeah, let's get back into this thing about, okay, we've always heard we need to lead by example. And now you're telling us don't lead by example. Help us understand where you're coming from on that. What does this mean?
So I'll give you a story. That's the best way to illustrate it. Okay.
Yeah.
And I lead the book off with this, but I had this instance when I was in the training manager slot where I was working with this particular cafe manager and having a similar problem, the same problem. And I would sit down and say, okay, so this, what's going on? I always ask the question, you started with what's your why? I'm like, I asked the question, what's going on? I try to find out what's really happening here. And then in talking to this person, they said that they would address the problem. The staff isn't listening to them. They're going to address the problem. And I'd say, okay. And then I trust the leaders, and then trust but verify, come back about a week or two later and check in and say, and see there's no change in behavior. The customer service is down, there are a lot of opportunities for success. So then again, meet with the person, the manager, and I say, so what's happening? What's going on? And tell me how this is going. I'm not seeing any change. How are you informing? How are you cascading this message? Well, I don't. I mean, what are your meetings like? What are your one-on-ones like? Well, I don't really have them. Well, then how are you leading? And so, well, I lead by example. And the person's thought process was that because I'm doing it, therefore they should do it, because when I was coming up the ranks, I looked to my leadership for that inspiration, and I followed what they did. I dressed like they did, that kind of old school way of doing it. And my point is that as we go generational leadership, that not everybody wants to be you, but you need them to do a job. They are hired to do a job. We didn't hire them to give them a job. We hired them because we needed the job done. So
Right.
as a leader, it's our responsibility to make sure that this job gets done, that these people that are employees get the training they need and the guidance they need. And that's where we have to have those difficult conversations, those one-on-one, and then ask the questions like you did. What is your why? Why are you here? Why did you want to work for us? And then go from there. But it
So-
has to be intentional. You have to tell them what you want them to do. And I use that thing I lead the book off with. So basically you're telling me that you're upset that they didn't do what you didn't ask them to do. And that's kind of the thing. So that's why you don't lead by example. You lead by intention. You can model by example.
Lead by intention. You
Mhm.
want to define that? When you use the word intention, help us understand that.
Okay, so that's basically saying, all right, what's my job here? Why am I here? Why is this company paying me to do what I'm doing as a leader? Okay, and then say, okay, this is the job I have to get done. You look at your metrics, you look at your scorecard, whatever you're held accountable for.
Okay.
The people that you surround yourself with are being compensated to help further the goals of the company. It's a system that helps reach the vision. Okay. So leading with intention is saying, okay, what's happening here? How can I better train? How can I better educate the people that work with me on what I need them to accomplish? Okay. So that's the intention part of it.
Yeah. I talk about the want to and the how to. And if somebody has the want to, you can usually teach them the how to for the most part.
Right.
But if they don't,
Let's
Teddy?
talk about that for a minute real quick. Let's take Sharon's question.
Sure.
Sharon says, no, actually, I want to do Dale's question because that's more apropos. Get you in a minute, Sharon.
Sure.
And Dale asks, do you believe there are some people who are not, capital letters, teachable? And then they use the thought of stereotypical groups. And either way, whether it's stereotypical or there are people who may not be teachable, how do you solve that, Thom?
I think by asking questions, and I deal with this in a currently. I mean, I'm dealing with this, and when I have staff members and as part of development that are not hitting what we want to do, I ask them, why are we here? Why are you here? Why do you think you're here? How do you think you fit in? I don't think there are groups that aren't teachable, but I think individuals are not. Some individuals don't want to be teachable. So they learn. Usually, it's that they learn in a different way. Yeah. For example, in the current training programs that we're using, we use a lot of books to inform. But some of the younger generation don't like that. They just don't. But it's a requirement. So we have to figure out other ways to get the same message off. I'm thinking of Simon Sinek's Start With Why. Mm-hmm. Okay. For example, an incredible book, but not everybody's going to read it. However, on YouTube, there's the Simon Sinek video, Start With Why. And that 16-minute thing is what I use to start that process with individuals. So finding out how to reach them.
Yeah, we've different learning styles. I learn a lot by watching something get done, mm-hmm. and then having watched it, then, okay, let me try it. And Thom, you keep an eye on me here, make sure I'm not, doing something mm-hmm. terrible. But that's how I'm better at learning that way. Now, if I have to sit and read a book and follow instructions, I might as well.
Sure.
Might as well move on because I'm going to read the manual and mm-hmm. that whole thing. Right. Yeah.
Right.
Interesting. Teddy got
by the way, 37 million views of Simon Sinek's Why conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm right behind him with the views on my videos.
Sure.
You're not right behind me.
Right. Well, it's 1 or 2 decimal points.
Yeah.
So, nobody knows.
Let's see. Do you want to? I'll grab Sharon's question.
All right.
How do you adjust your leadership style, or do you? As I'm going to add, adjust your leadership style when you're trying to work with people who fundamentally want to see it different. Example: they don't like to read books. Your leadership style in the organization, as you said, is lots of books. So how do you adjust to accommodate those who want it differently?
Well, and that's a good question. We adjust by finding out. I ask the questions just simply, how do you learn?
Yeah.
You know, how do you receive information? You know, when you're doing other tasks, for example. And then once you establish the why, like Randy was saying about the want to, if they want to, then you can go further. You know, and then utilize the other channels such as video.
Yeah. You find I go back to my early day, Teddy. I haven't shared this with you. This is back when I had hair. Back when I started as a recruiter, was a headhunter back in the 90s.
When you were still using a Commodore 64?
Before that, we didn't even have email back then. We smiled and dialed all day long. We had a Harris Directory of Manufacturers and used SIC codes to go hunt down folks for the job openings. And now I've almost forgotten what I was going to say. Thank you, Teddy. But I remembered it. I remember our manager, a guy named Gene, said to everyone, we had like half a dozen or so recruiters in the office. And he said to each of us individually, he said, what level do you want to attain?
Yeah.
And he said, I will coach, prod, kick your tail to get you to the level. And if you don't give a hoot and you just want to be a minimum performer and just barely skate by, that's fine, whatever. And I'll coach you up to that level. But you tell me how much of me you want or need, and I'll give it to you.
Yeah, that's great.
And that's what he did. And, I said, well, as long as you keep paying me, I'll slide by. No, but
I love that. That's great.
Point was, though, he didn't say, hey, this is a one size fits all. Everybody has to be at this level or you're a failure and your butt's out the door. Right. He said, help me understand where you want to be and I'll help you get there. Yeah. And always remember that in a good way, because we're all different. We all have different levels of, motivation or drive. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you find that with workers. Some are higher achievers than others, but that doesn't mean that if they're a C player that they have to be out the door.
Right.
Necessarily. So how do you coach that C player, or is there a way to light a fire in there? I know you said you ask questions, but I'm short of, bribing them or threatening them, carrot or stick. How do you get them to move off the C level and into the B or higher?
Well, C players are fine and they're necessary for it. And we see that quite a bit. And people just say, I just want to be at this level. I'm going to do exactly what you asked me to do and nothing more. And that's fine. Okay. And the ones that want to, we work to develop up. The ones that are like C minus into the D's, that if they're not going to go, if they're not going to step up and show up, and usually that starts to show itself in other ways. For example, if they are starting to slope down, it's going to be manifest in attendance, or punctuality, or something like that.
Sure.
And now they're self-selecting to be out, in my view. You
find so that happens, and maybe we can talk later on in the show about developing leaders. I think that's a mark of a good leader, is to develop people to basically take their place and encourage that next generation to take the torch and move on. This is a war like we've never seen for talent. It's a full-time gig for you to find people and train them and develop them. So I'm wondering, I don't know if it's a generational thing or if it's just a sign of the times or whatever, but just the whole idea of, we hear this thing like quiet quitting and, I'll just do what I need to. And if old Hayes here gives me the evil eye, heck with him. I'm going to move down the street and I'll get a job somewhere else.
Right.
And, that's a lousy attitude, but that's the way it is these days in a lot of cases. Would you disagree with that?
No, I think you're right on.
All right.
So it's a challenge that we have to show up. I think so. Retention's a real big part of my job. It makes, if I retain people, right, at the organization, that makes my life easier. Okay. It makes the company function better, because you every more reps you do, the more experienced you become. So retention is attention, right? it's a kind of a cliche, retention is attention, but it's true. You give attention to the individuals, they are more likely to stay, and they will, if they are happy, they're telling other people, and we get employee referrals, or customers see, I want to work for this organization. But it really does come to giving them the attention, finding out what they want, what's in it for them. And when I first took this position last year, I went around to a lot of employees and I asked, why are you here when you honestly, if you could just go down the street and make a couple of dollars more? He said, it's the people. It's the people. So, yeah.
Go ahead, finish up, Thom.
Well, that's basically it. I mean, if you recognize the individuals, and the team knows that you recognize the individuals, and you're looking at to build everyone else, they will also, that team now at that level that you've given the attention to, that you've invested in, will now help maintain itself. And it becomes kind of a standard model where they don't want to disappoint their team members. That has nothing to do with the up and down. That has to do with the left and the right. I'm going to show up and I'm going to do the best job I can do, because I don't want to let the person to my left and the person to my right down.
I got that. Yeah.
What if there's some of that, Thom, you can take back to your military days?
Correct.
Where, you don't let your guy down beside you. Right. And
right.
So there's that. Right. Yeah. Teddy, did you?
Yeah. I want to go back to, Dean asked the question about, so does that mean average is not good? And the thought I have in that when they ask that question, maybe average is okay, but the challenge that individuals have in specific jobs is that the need of the business and the requirements of that job may change.
Correct.
So average is always going to be based on what's the requirements today. Mm-hmm. Thoughts on that? How do people?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, a great statement. We have a review process, for example, which is 5-star review, right? Five levels of review, which is not at standards, needs improvement, meets standards, above standards, and exceeds standards. Okay. Yeah. The meets standards, which we're calling the average, is if everybody in our company, or whatever company I'm talking about, if everybody meets standards, that's fine, because that's the level that the company said, this is what I'm expecting of you to do. This is what I need from you to do for us all to succeed.
Yeah.
So if everybody is average in that, it's fine. But you do need the leaders above. You do need to grow up. And to your point, it's we should say the truth. It's the truth, and the truth has changed.
Yeah.
Okay. So as you have a pandemic now, or you're going through different levels, economy, rising food costs in our business, things like that. So as these things change, the expectation of the average changes as well.
Yeah.
So
and the challenge is go back to why. The challenge is, as those expectations change, because the business now needs to take on bigger animals and has bigger competition, whatever the reasons are, the employee needs to understand why this has changed.
Good point. Yeah. So transparency and explaining. Yeah, exactly. Yep. Yeah. I love that.
I just wonder too about you touched on the word COVID, and that sort of sets off a chain reaction that we ask a lot of our guests. And, the world changed back a few years ago, and it's still we're not through it entirely, although we're kind of hopefully, the back end of it. But how has that changed your ability to do what you do, and just thoughts on how COVID has impacted your line of work?
Well, like anything, I think that it's COVID showed us possibilities. It showed us challenge, but also possibilities. And I think from the individual side, that whole quiet quitting element, the mass resignation, people leaving jobs hit health a while, it's because COVID has shown them a different way. And how that impacts our business now is that, for example, curbside, right? Now people are accustomed to are accustomed to going up and having food brought out to them, or having food delivered. You look at DoorDash, you look at Uber Eats, things like that, right? It's now it's common. So these changes are just change the way we do business.
And thus changes the requirements and the expectations of lots of different employees.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's it.
Interesting. Yeah, there's just a lot of factors that go on in this employment scenario. Body, just a fewer available workers, and then you've got all kinds of different options. You could be an Uber driver instead of working at a retail store or what have you. So big war for talent. We maybe get into some more of the challenges that you face with the recruiting side. We touched briefly on developing leaders, and you said that's kind of also the mark of a good leader. Can you think of examples maybe from your past or where I'm going to ask you this in a roundabout way, but I guess, do you look at and identify those who you feel have that potential and challenge them and work closer with them? Or do you leave it to them to approach you proactively and say, I want to get to whatever, help me get there, coach? Do you have one or the other? Is it just all over?
It's a little bit of both.
Is it really?
Yeah, because it used to be early on in my career, I would go after people and say, I think this person is good, and I would force them to go up into this element. But it's kind of like the Peter principle, right? Which is that you're to the highest degree of incompetence to hit that wall.
Teddy, am I there yet?
Randy, we'll talk about that later.
All right, I'm working on it, but I digress.
Right. So I've learned that doesn't work. I mean, in my experience anyway, if your leader can identify and start talking to people and kind of reward them and coach them and encourage them, but can't force them, can't force them into a higher position than they're ready for, because they have to be emotionally ready for it. Not just, I want to do it because I want to make more money. And if they're not there, then you can't.
Yeah. Hey, Teddy, it's almost half past the hour, and we've got a handful of questions there that deal with hiring.
I want to hit Mike Brock's question, and then I'll position for the ad spot as we continue to practice, so that Randy and I continuously meet expectations. And the expectations of this show is that we're always doing better. But go back to what Mike Brock asked this question. He says the interview process is so critical. They're trying to avoid marginal employees. I would think that most employers are going to look for people who can exceed expectations, which in fact, as I try to spill water, which in fact will create a need to raise expectations on others. Am I saying that? What do you think of that idea, Thom?
I think it depends on the role.
Yeah.
It really does depend on the role. If I'm looking at leadership, I'm looking for that. Heck yeah, this person just blows me away. And if I'm looking for a team member, for example, I'm looking for someone that is kind. We hire for kindness.
Yeah.
Okay. For that organization. So I'm looking for someone that is kind and shows up. And again, to the higher levels, where we're hiring somebody externally for a leadership role, we are looking for what else? What's proof of the pudding? What have you done? What have you shown that you can do? Not just I think I can. What have you done? Tell me a story.
Yeah. So, by the way, hard for people to do until they practice this enough. So good point. Back at you, Randy.
Well, I was going to say, let's take the break and we'll dive into some more, and we'll talk also a little bit about the book here in this next half hour. So anything you want to mention at the half hour break?
Randy and I have, we've had a conversation with a really cool sponsor. Hope to have them on the show by next week. So look forward to that. But also want to share with you that we've created a Patreon relationship, because we want our audience to be involved in the show as well. So we're experimenting with using Patreon to bring our audience in to be sponsors. Again, as this grows, as Patreon grows with us, we will create new solutions, new activity, new engagement as well. We're still developing it, but we want you to know that not only are we going to have a sponsor who's going to help us go to another level, but we would love to have our audience be supporters as well. And depending on how that grows, we may create some other cool things that we do. There's actually conversations going on about maybe doing a live show where we're in the flesh, not just on the screen. So stay tuned.
Are we
for all
wearing
that.
clothes? I hope we're wearing clothes, Teddy. I mean, you say we're in the flesh. Are you talking? We've got clothes on, right?
Oh Lordy, I forgot about that. We might have to change the design a little bit because we should wear clothes. Yeah. Anyway, stay tuned for all of that. Back to
Tom
you,
Hayes. Tom Hayes is our guest. He has a book entitled "Don't Lead by Example: Thoughts and Essays on Leadership and Life." He's right here in our backyard in Clemmons, North Carolina, and great career, great book by the way. I've read parts of it, Tom, and I mentioned beforehand I haven't read cover to cover, but I do know we had last week's guest on, and he's in the book.
Oh, yes,
Malcolm McDougall. And if Malcolm is watching, kudos to Malcolm for introducing the two of us, Tom. And so more to come on that. By the way, if you would like to have I guess a complimentary copy of Tom's book, would you want to do that now, Teddy? And maybe just take the first three people who.
So here's what I'd like to do. Let's
first.
I always like to throw down a challenge, Randy. You know that. So,
okay. All right.
Drop into chat your thoughts, one sentence about what does "don't lead by example" mean to you. One sentence. What does "don't lead by example" mean to you? And I'll collect those and give them to Tom, and then I'll introduce the winner to Tom via email. How's that?
Right. Ben Franklin. I put, that's the answer to everything. Bondizer, right? Yeah. So there's that. But if you have comments or questions for Tom as well, just drop them in the chat. Teddy will keep an eye on that. Hey, I'm a big sports nut, right? I just got through the bowl season and my Buckeyes were this close, but couldn't quite pull it off. Ben, I've heard this for years, and I think this also kind of meshes with business too. And that's that maybe your top performers, whether it's in sports or even in sales or even in doing their job, the top people tend to get promoted into management, or typically, but that's not always the best thing. It's a different set of skills. Let's talk a little bit more about that. I'm killing it in sales, and now I'm the sales manager, and suddenly our team suffers. What's going on with that?
Sure, that's the example I would use, and I've been guilty of that too in promoting in the past. Early on, it's that you have somebody that's an excellent job, does an excellent job in terms of, say, in retail, a head cashier. And then you say, well, we've got this position. This person's been just killing it for years in this role, and expresses interest in this other management role. And you're like, naturally, it's easy. It's an easy thing. I've got all these problems. This is a natural fit. So I'm going to move this person there. Chess. And then what happens is there's a gap that's not being addressed with that. And you're not setting that individual up to succeed, and you're hurting the company, and other people see it. You're hurting your credibility. So it's just not a good thing without filling that gap. And that's one of the reasons I address that in the book, Don't Lead by Example, because you see that happen quite a bit.
Well, also, hey, if I'm a high performer and maybe you don't feel like I have the leadership skills to pull off that promotion, so you give it to Teddy Burriss instead, and I'm killing him numbers wise, but yet he gets the promotion. Now, what's that going to do for my attitude? How do you satisfy me at that point, or keep me there? Or I just say, yeah, Hayes, you're full of it. I'm out of here.
And Tom, I need to know this answer, because this is something I'm working through.
Every day, my friend.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you deal with that when I get bypassed, when I feel like, hey, I've earned it?
Right.
Well, I've displayed. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important in that if you're talking about internal candidates getting promoted up, that you interview them that you interview them and you have these tall questions, you have these questions about the related to the role, and then specific to their performance. One technique we use is, and I'm circling back there in a second, is we put out the job description of the role. Okay, so if you actually have the job description of it, and these are the elements that this person in this position are required to hit, take a highlighter and say, which of these do you feel confident in? And that time, the individual may not realize that is what is required of that role. They may just think it's what they see from the individual, but not understanding everything the person's doing behind the scenes. So then, in answer to your question, when you make that decision, you say, based on everything, if it was just based on sales, if it's just based on numbers, Randy, you would get it. There's no question about it. It's not. But it's based on these other skills that you don't have yet. All right. And we made the decision to go with this individual who does it. What we want to do in the interim, or at the same simultaneously, is work with you to help you get those skills. If that's the role you want, we're going to work with you to help you get there because we believe in you.
Yeah, that makes sense versus just saying, hey, we went with somebody else. And I'll tell you, as a, and I deal a lot with job hunters. I mean, that's my job is helping them. And, we encourage them to try to get feedback when they're not selected, but it becomes very difficult, especially when they're interviewing externally with other company. They're not going to say, hey, we like part of you, but we don't like this other part. And you need to go, hone your skills. And because anything invites a lawsuit and you just don't want to go there. So any advice for job hunters who are externally or even internally looking for another job and how they can try to solicit that information? Because not all managers are going to be like you, Thom, and kind of lay it out and say, hey, man, we want to help you. They're just going to be just like, we went with another person. So how do you try to draw that information out from those hiring officials?
I think after the fact, it's very difficult, but during the interview, the last part of the interview, which do you have any questions for me? Or do you have any questions for us? If it's a panel interview, it's the question should be specific to the organization and say, is there anything that I've said that has given you concerns that I can address now? Try to get it out there at that point where they say, well, we're looking for someone with a little more experience in accounting, for example, or whatever else. But ask during the interview. It's very important that question, it's not a throwaway question. What questions do you have for me? At the end of the interviewing, asking other questions, the interviewee then says, is there anything that I've said, or is there any blanks, anything after when we leave this meeting here, is there anything that is going to give you pause or cause for concern that I can address right now? And if they don't take the bait and they say, no, I think we're good. Then are you out of luck at that point, realistically, in terms of trying to get a real answer at some point? From my perspective, on the other side of it, yes. I think if you do a follow-up, if you have a relationship with a person, if you use LinkedIn, I love LinkedIn, you might be able to get something. But again, to your point, there's a legal liability, and we are just really conscious of not saying anything that can be used against you later on.
Eddie, any other questions? There's some other conversation in the chat. Anything you want to share? And Cat got his tongue, so
Thom, nothing at this point, Randy. But I'll tell you, Thom, this don't lead by example includes for candidates not to do interviews the way somebody in the 1950s did interviews. People are going to tell you, well, the way you interview is you look really good. You come in there with a notepad and 5 copies of your resume, and you look really good, and you answer their questions in 2 minutes or less. It's way different than that. And the best way to have an interview, I don't care if it's a job interview or a contract interview, is not just answer their questions, but engage the other person. That's the word, engage them in a good, open conversation. And if you do that from the get-go, which I don't really know what that means, but I understand
That's
it.
from the 1950s, Teddy.
Yeah, I was gonna say, buddy, if you do that in the beginning, then when you get to the end of the interview, you've had a powerful, mutually beneficial conversation.
Right.
Yeah. Hey, on the back to the book thing, Teddy. We've had a few comments about. Or I don't know if you're keeping score with that.
I got it. Yep.
Okay, you got it.
All
right. So,
before the end.
Hey, Tom, anything else you want to throw in? We've hit a few other topics here. So, anything based on the past questions we've thrown that you want to button up?
I don't know if we're going into that later, but then situational leadership.
Yeah. 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 Well, let's tackle. I didn't know if there was anything that we had covered in the last 10, 15 minutes you wanted to finish up with before we moved on to situational leadership.
Unanswered questions.
Okay. Well, here's one. Listen, we've always done it this way. It's, why are you trying to rock the boat? We've always done it this way.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that? Whether as a leader hearing it from one of your team folks, or as a team player, hearing it from your manager, and you're going, I don't think so.
Mm-hmm.
How do you try to persuade, cajole, or just do you take your ball and go home?
Yeah. No, I deal with this constantly, and I've done in every place I've worked in the military and civilian life. It's been that way where we've always done it this way, or I know it says to do it this way, but we do it this way.
Ooh.
Yeah. So, which I just makes me cringe. Basically, what I do, and I coach leaders on this too, is say, okay, I understand you already said that this way. Can you show me where it says that? Go to the source document, because you have this mythology, this urban legends of things, a way we do things. And what I found is that the person that, when you start asking your whys, or why is this, or how'd you learn this? And they said, well, that's right. What they said. Well, who's they?
Who's they?
Who's they? I mean, well, was it so-and-so? No, I don't know. I don't remember. So let's go and find out. Let's find out together. Let's learn together where it is. And that's where I try to steer them all back to find out the source document. There should only be one. My belief is this, that there should be one way when you're working for the company, what that is. Now you can change that way, but until that way is changed, you do it that way. And that's what I try to go back. And that kind of diffuses everything, where you have, this person told me this person tells me this. And we see this, and again, in every company I work for, where when I'm interviewing the frontline workers, saying, how's it going? What's going on? What are your frustrations? And it's always that this leader said it this way, and this leader tells me to do it this way. And then this other person's questioning why I'm doing it that way. It's very frustrating. And if we're looking at retention, if we're looking at engagement, you've got to solve that problem and come back to the leadership and just keep hitting it. Use the source document, use the policies and procedures. And if they need to be changed, fine, but not now. We'll put this into we'll put it in a parking lot, we'll review it, and you may be totally right, but right now we're going to do it this way. Yeah.
What about assessments? Of course, Malcolm was on last week. Yeah, it was last week, and big with Clifton Strengths, and as you look to put together a team, how much weight do you assign to that, or Myers-Briggs personality, and just the different assessments to understand who you're playing with here?
Yeah, that's a good point. We use that primarily at the management level. I've used Barnes & Noble was big on strengths assessment. And I can tell you the company I'm with now uses CORE. It's CORE assessments, and that breaks it down into merchant, banker,
Tom, is that a local company's tool?
Trevero.
Trevero.
Yes.
But Trevero owned by a local company?
They're out of Winston-Salem. I mean, I know them as Trevero.
The resource?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They've been on our show. They're good friends of ours.
That's great.
Yeah, I took that a while ago. I think I flunked it. No. Yeah, but I took it a long time ago. Yeah.
They grade on the scale, Randy.
It's not a pass fail. Huh? Okay.
So it's a wonderful tool, and we use it because when we're trying to build a leadership team, particularly at the director level, we want balance. We don't want people that are all like, we don't want the whole team to be in the banker element where they're very conservative, guarded, or all the innovator element, which is all looking for the shiny objects and what's next. We want a balance. We want a balance. So we use those assessments. And we circulate it among the team when we're doing interviewing.
Yeah, I see what you mean. And in the fact that you have different locations that you're working to fill, maybe you say, hey, I can't use that person in this
Correct.
team, but maybe they could work in a different role or in a different location where we may have that opening for that type of personality.
Agreed.
Might make sense.
That's
Yeah.
100% correct. Yes.
Yeah. You
Yep.
kind of get them there. Any other, Teddy, anything else you're seeing in the?
I think Dean's being a little facetious. He wants to know, can you fail an internet-based personality test? And I don't think so, Dean. You won't fail it, dude. Take the test, man. You'll be happy you did. Back to you, buddy.
Yeah, I'm just looking at some of the different comments, and I could formulate questions from there, or I can just wing it like I usually do, Teddy. But we also have talking points, thankfully, and I just want to make sure that we've not missed anything. So we all set with situational leadership. Anything else you want to cover on that topic?
Yeah, I
think from
there's
there.
a lot actually, but I'll try to keep it brief.
Yeah,
I think
please.
that situational leadership is so important in terms of understanding where a person is in their development, and that's something I really believe in. It's Ken Blanchard. It's you look at a person that comes on board, we call them a D1, a developmental level 1, or and they're excited. They're like, I've got a great job. I love this company. This is great. Okay. So the leadership responsibility, which is an S, a situational sense for S, would be to just show them tactically, okay, this is great that you're excited. We love having you here. And this is what I need you to do. And this is how you do it. All right. And that's all well and good until they hit D2. And you see D2, developmental level 2, that's when you're like, oh crap, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. This is harder than I thought it was going to be. Maybe I don't fit here. Maybe it's a self-doubt that comes in there. And I see this, and you can just watch it in body language. It's great. So I try to teach leaders to understand that occurs both in private life and in professional life. You can see people go down that D2. And at that point, that's the key one, where you retain somebody or you lose them, because the leader has to then come in and be able to recognize that and say, hey, that's when the encouragement comes in. You're doing great, man. I remember the first time I started here, I had the same doubts, same thoughts. I didn't know how to do this, and now I'm good at it. So that leader's at that level. So those are the two key ones. Ultimately, you go through a D3, which is just kind of getting it, and a D4 where they're independent, which is where we want to go.
Is there a magic number of days or months where hey, if they pass this 6-month threshold, we're pretty good, or is it shorter than that, especially in this day and age?
Yeah, I think it depends on the job, the industry, and everything like that. We look at about 60 to 90 days that they are comfortable. They are sufficient, if not proficient, in what they're doing, and just constantly check in. And that's the key thing: just constantly checking in with them, do a temperature check.
I wonder, and again, we'll mention, you're with a franchisee of Chick-fil-A, and Chick-fil-A is, I think, well recognized for their customer service and, the attitude that they're greeted with. You even mentioned, I think one of the key things is kindness. You can teach the how to do things. So, and I'll call those, I know Teddy doesn't like the word soft skills, it kind of sort of, but that's what they're called, the personality traits. So you really, it sounds like you really are more focused on, we want to hire the person and the attitude, the want to piece more so, right, especially at the team level, because I assume then you can teach them how to do the work, but you can't teach them to smile and say the right thing and say it with some level of meaning, right?
That's exactly right.
And I got to wonder, why don't other companies do this?
Good question.
Especially your competitors in what I'll call the fast food environment. Why don't they do this?
I think it's really, I have no idea why. I mean, this model works really well for us, and I think it's constantly reinforced by the customers. We staff it properly, and I think more companies should adopt it because and I also use soft skills. I think that's how I refer to it. Sorry, Teddy. I don't know.
No, I'm good with it. I mean, it's a term we all use, and so I'm okay with the term in the use of the conversation. I think they're just far more important. I often say that by calling them that, we don't think of them as importantly as we should.
Okay.
That's my hitch. And Randy and I have talked about this, but go back to Randy's question. Why don't other people, use the same philosophies that at Chick-fil-A and the same styles and tactics? It may not be so much that they're using the wrong styles and tactics and philosophies. It goes back to what you said earlier. We're not all doing the same thing and walking the same walk and talking the same talk. It makes no difference what philosophies or practices you're using. It won't be as good as it could be.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. We've got a few minutes left, so we're going to ask you to summarize here in a few. So bear with us here. And also, Teddy, you've got the book stuff squared away.
I've already taken care of that. It's all I've already collected the information, and I'm gonna send it to Thom, and Thom will notify the winner.
All right. So another talking point that you mentioned on here was when it comes to sales objectives, and again, I'll use the fast food industry, especially when I think about going to eat at a sit-down restaurant, and you think about upselling. My son was a waiter in college. And, how hard do you push for the appetizer, or how hard do you push for the extra drink or whatever, the upselling and the hesitancy on the part of the wait staff to make the ask for that? How do you try to overcome that?
So I've had to do that many times in my career. And I'll tell you that it's basically a mindset where you work with the employee to understand that why are they having challenges doing it? And it's often, well, I don't like being asked that way. So I hate when I go to a place and they ask me if I'm a member or I'm on this or I'm that and rewards program. So therefore, I don't feel comfortable asking other people.
Yeah. So
depending on the organization, if it's part of your job, that's part of your job. And you have to explain it that way. But also give them the tools to say, you're by not asking them, you are denying that customer the ability to make the decision for themselves. So you want to ask them, explain the benefits, and then allow them to make that decision. Don't make the decision for the customer.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What about the kind of along the same lines? That ain't my job. It's not my job.
Don't give him any fuel, Thom.
It ain't my job. That's what I tell Teddy all the time when he asks me to do stuff. And I said, Teddy, I want to see the job description. It's not in there. How do you overcome that it's not my job mentality? Or do you just say, you know what? There's the door.
Yeah.
How do you do
say that? One of the things is front loading it. Simply in the job description, you put the line "other tasks as assigned."
Ooh. Now, don't give Teddy any ideas. Right? Okay. That's the next step.
Right.
And that's a vague thing. And Goodwill has that, as I'm sure many other companies do. And it just makes sense to do that because job roles, job functions can change, just like we talked at the opening of the show when new technology comes out and COVID comes out, and now we're having to meet customers outdoors and hand stuff to them, whatever. And so I think we need to be flexible and adaptable to change, whether we're in management or as a team member, because, well, things change. All right. Any observations on anything that we've covered that real quick that you want to button up before I ask you to close down with a couple of takeaways?
Nothing I can think of.
Okay. Well, we've done well. All right. So let's think of a couple, 3 quick takeaways. If people want to remember a few things about what you talked about today, what are some things that they should take away with them?
So I go back to the secret to retention is attention, and that's giving people, engaging with them, talking with them, whether it's in sales, whatever the industry, or even just in personal life. You give people attention, show them they matter, that they're valued to you as an individual and as an organization. And then one thing we didn't cover, but I would talk about is know the difference between agree with and support. And I talk about this in the book. that somebody that doesn't want to do something because they don't agree with it. Now, granted, you have the guardrails of, is it legal? Is it ethical? And if you're in those things, but they still don't agree with a certain decision the companies make, their role is to support it.
Yeah.
And if they can't do that, then that may not be a good fit for them.
Yeah.
And finally, don't lead by example. That'd be my takeaway.
I don't know where you came up with that one.
I know. Yeah. So,
No, that makes sense. So, and I'll compare that agree and support. Last week with Malcolm, that's what we talked about briefly. Was you mentioned about going in the huddle in a football team, and the receiver says, "Hey, throw me the ball. I can beat this guy." Or, "Hey, the running back says, man, I could blow through that hole. Give me the ball."
Mhm.
But when they break the huddle, the quarterback has made that call, whether it came in from the sidelines or the quarterback called it, and everybody all better be on that same page.
agreed.
They may not agree with it, but they have to support it. Otherwise, you're going to be shopping for a new quarterback because he's going to get knocked out. Hey, Thom Hayes, thanks for joining us today. The book
Thom,
is
great.
Don't Lead by Example, and it's available, I think, on Amazon and pretty much everywhere. Normally, you could get it. So, Teddy, do you have you want to do, or I don't know if you're going to announce that, keep prompting you for that, but maybe you just want to do it privately and just send messages.
No, I'm going to send the content to Thom, and Thom will pick the best one and send that person an email. So
Okay.
yeah, I don't want to pick it. I'll just send all the comments to Thom and he'll pick it. So
Great.
Very cool.
Thanks a lot for joining us. Really do appreciate it. The back-to-back, with Malcolm last week and you this week. And by the way, our special guest next week is Rich Slentz. Now, do you know Rich, Thom?
No, I do not.
You need to know Rich. Ask me to introduce you. You need to know Rich Slentz. Rich has been on the show before. Rich is, very relevant conversations. He's coming on the show. He's going to talk about, it's not about the work. Talking about humans, employees, retention, productivity. It's not about the work. And Thom, I would guarantee you that you will align in lots of ways to Rich's philosophies, lots of ways. So again, Randy, you got something else?
Well, I just had a quick story. We've still got a couple, 3 minutes left. Yep. And, the focus for years and years with businesses has typically been, hey, crank out the best product at the best price, have good service. And so the focus being more so on external customers versus the internal customers, the workers who produce the service, the product, or whatever. And whether it's mental health issues, whether it's, you see it in the news, burnout, quiet quitting, call it whatever you want. But I see a pivot, particularly too, in light of, George Floyd and the DEI issue, and having employees feel a sense of belonging where they are, where they can bring their whole selves to work, and that their needs are a bit more attention's paid to their needs versus show up, do the job, shut up, do it as I tell you, or get out, because we have a product to make here. And I'm seeing more of a holistic approach, I think, as companies look at their employees as a valued partner. And to your point, retention's a heck of a lot cheaper than recruiting.
Yeah.
So if you can create that culture and foster that, then I think that, first of all, it's the right thing to do. But secondly, it's the bottom line, it's the right thing to do. So I'll get off my soapbox. Teddy, any quick things before we head out?
My short little story there is I absolutely hate it when people say they told me this is how you do it. I'm like Thom, I want to know who they is. So Thom, again, thanks for being on the show. Love our audience. Thank you for our audience for being here today. Invite your friends. Come join us every week. And next week we'll have Rich Slentz on, and we hope to see everybody there. So Randy, Thom, audience, y'all have a great day. Bye.
Thank you. See you, Thom.
Thank you.
Thank you.